defeated within 9 or 10 years. And I know we made a lot of progress in the past year. What's the gut feeling? I hear that word, gut. What's the gut feeling that how many years it will take in Iraq?
I think that it depends on what you mean by defeated, but I think you're right. Any counterinsurgency takes a sustained commitment. There's no doubt. I hesitate to give you a time, and most would, but I will tell you that what we've done in the last year is one of the most dramatic turnarounds that has ever historically occurred in a counterinsurgency fight. What we've seen, because we've committed more troops and Al-Qaeda overplayed its hand, is the population essentially almost completely flip in all the Sunni areas, starting in Anbar province, in places like Ramadi, where we committed more troops, brought the violence down, and then the tribal sheikhs took advantage of that opportunity to expel Al-Qaeda. Because, you know, they may not necessarily love Americans, but they sure as heck don't want to be governed by Sharia law and radical Islamic law. And that's not something that has a history in Iraq. And Iraq has a traditionally more of a secular history, a non-sectarian history. And so they allowed Al-Qaeda in to defend themselves against Shia militias that they saw imposing on their neighborhoods and their areas. Well, once we brought that violence down, they said, well, we don't want Al-Qaeda around here. And they actually, when they used the term occupier, they use it talking about Al-Qaeda, not us. And it's an interesting twist because most people think that they see us as occupiers, and it's Al-Qaeda in these largely Sunni areas that they see as the occupiers. So we pushed them out of Anbar province and then throughout Baghdad. And the neighborhood I'm talking about was one example where because the key in any counterinsurgency fight, and this is why it takes so much time, is you're dealing with the sympathies of the population. Some people say hearts and minds. I prefer the term strategic sympathies. I mean, what you have to do is your protection is the population, because you're fighting an enemy that doesn't wear uniforms and hides and lives amongst the population. So the only way you find out who the enemy is by being able to sift through and identify that enemy. And you do that through intelligence. And the only way you get intelligence is by the population trusting you enough and knowing you enough to give you that intelligence. And you have to have that population shifting before you can actually sort of gain the upper hand in the fight. And that's what happened throughout Anbar province, but in the microcosms of the neighborhoods in Baghdad. You know, there's also on the Shia side the Mahdi army and Muqtada al-Sadr, which has been and remains a worry. Muqtada al-Sadr is nowhere near as strong as he used to be, but he still has this Mahdi army under the surface that has extended its ceasefire for 6 months. But we've killed most of his top lieutenants. So Muqtada al-Sadr is not as strong as he used to be. And he is not the big player that he used to be, and that's in the Shia side. So we've taken down the two chief accelerants of what was a low-level civil war in Al-Qaeda and the Shia militias, which has given us the opportunity to create this political space, which was the goal of the surge, was to bring the violence down, but then also create an opportunity for Iraqis to bring about political reconciliation. Well, at the local level, we've certainly seen that, with local councils standing up and these sons of Iraq, these concerned local citizens groups that have stood up to defend their own neighborhoods. And then you've also seen it at the national level. The national government recently, they passed a budget. I mean, heck, we can't even pass a budget in Washington, D.C. They passed an amnesty law for sort of former low-level insurgents, which is very important to the Sunnis. They passed a de-Baathification law, a provincial elections law. They're working on an oil law, but they're already sharing oil. Their budget that they passed allocates oil to the provinces throughout the country. They may not have an oil law yet, but they're already doing it. So what we've done is created that opportunity for a peaceful Iraq. And I think the transition that's important, we all have to make mentally, is that we have to stop seeing Iraq as an enemy and start seeing Iraq as an ally. All right? Where we did fight and bring down the Iraqi regime, but today we've trained an Iraqi security forces that now has 550,000 men. That 550,000 men are fiercely loyal to their American counterparts, which is a ramification of this conflict that is very positive for us. And you also have a government that is working alongside us to provide services for the population. So you've got a government now that is coming alongside us to fight our enemies and their enemies in Al-Qaeda and Iranian-backed militias. So we have to start looking at them more like we looked at sort of Germany and Japan and some of these other countries that we came alongside post-conflict, and less like they're an enemy that we should just kick to the curb. thanks, we did our best. We kind of tried to help you guys out. Good luck with Al-Qaeda in Iran, who just so happen to be our enemies, but we're not really going to help you with them. So I think we have to make that mental shift, and we're much closer today than we were before. Counterinsurgency 101 is protect the population and try to move their strategic alliances. 201 is have a trusted and indigenous security force that can take over for you. And we've made incredible strides in that area over the last 14 months since the surge was announced. And I think if we continue on that track with sufficient force levels, we will get to the point where more and more Iraqis are taking over their neighborhoods, and we can move back into an advisory role and really draw down our numbers, which we all want to happen. We just don't want the sacrifices that we've paid so much for to be in vain.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. My father did surveillance for the FBI during World War II. We've been doing surveillance for national security purposes since the phone was invented and before. And I find it unconscionable, with all due respect, that Representative Giffords will not support the President and our National Security Administration in supporting wiretapping and all the needed surveillance because we were in the middle of a war. But this has also been legal for over 100 years, and we've used it and we've needed it. It's not impinged on people's rights. But I'd like your opinion on the inability of Congress to pass the terrorist surveillance so that we can have full surveillance of all these terrorists and sympathizers that are apparently in this country. And apparently it's even impinging on our ability to have battlefield operations and full communications in the battlefield.
What most Americans don't understand about the FISA Act is that the FISA Act says that we can wiretap Americans that have had communication with terrorists, but that's never portrayed in the media or the news. For example, let's say an Al-Qaeda operative calls me in Oklahoma City. I take the call, I listen to the conversation, I call them back. They're on a monitoring network of this Al-Qaeda operative. They pick up, they trace my call. From that point on, under the FISA Act, they had legal precedent to begin monitoring my conversations as an American citizen. That's what the FISA Act is. But it's portrayed to you that, oh my gosh, we're violating civil liberties and we are going to eliminate your privacy and we're going to eliminate your ability to not be spied upon by the government. And that is a categorically false portrayal of what we had in place until we saw House Speaker Pelosi let this law expire. And now that it's expired, if I'm getting those calls in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and I'm starting to plan terror acts, I'm getting away with it because no one, now that the law has expired, is legally able to listen to my phone conversations. Now, if I'm calling Pete in New York, the FBI, they're not going to be able to listen to my conversations. They will have no legal precedent to do so. They would never get the authority or have those authorizations passed on something with normal conversations. It's only when foreign wanted and people that the FBI are watching contact Americans, then it becomes something that's authorized. American people need to speak up. You need to tell your congressman and you need to tell them, get this protection back to the American people so that we are not put at risk here.
I would add two things to that as it pertains to Iraq. If an insurgent calls another insurgent, but the call is routed through the United States, then we are not allowed to tap that. That's something that also falls underneath if FISA is not passed. So if somebody in Ramadi calls somebody in Fallujah, but the call, because of the international telephone networks that we have today, happens to be routed to the United States, which happens most of the time, then we can't tap that call. Well, so some people draw the conclusion then, well, and myself included, that we need to be providing our soldiers on the field every single tool they need to be successful. And if we can't monitor the communications of our enemies on the battlefield, that's like taking rounds out of our guys' magazines, because intelligence in this kind of fight is just as important as the body armor and the weapons that we've got on the field. So that's sort of an Iraq take on that particular act. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you talk a lot about Iraq and everything, and I know this Vets for Freedom tour talks a little bit about Afghanistan. Can you get into a little bit about what's truly happened in Afghanistan? Or anybody is aware?
I served in Afghanistan early in the war. I was there on Operation Enduring Freedom from December of '01. I got to Afghanistan in February of '02, and then I came home in August of '02. One of the things that we were very careful to establish in the planning for the security of Afghanistan was that it would really function on 4 or 5 pillars. One, it recognizes the fact that that you needed a government that would work among its traditions and its tribalism. So you had to establish a good government. The second was that you had to have a military that would protect that government. And since you had the Northern Alliance and you had all these different tribes that had banded together to fight the Pashtuns, which were supporting the Taliban, and then you had Al-Qaeda operatives and all of that banding together, they were still very much tribal. And then as you went over closer to the west side of Afghanistan, there was a lot of heavy influence from the Persians in Iran. And so we recognized that the military had to incorporate all of that feudalism and tribalism and even the playing field so that the units would be mixed and they would be led by many. So that was a second pillar. The other pillar that we worked on was economic. Afghanistan is a landlocked country. I mean, there's no port in Afghanistan. It's like Oklahoma. I mean, there's no ports going there. Unlike Oklahoma, there's very few roads that go through there. There's a huge mountain range in the middle, and we recognize that the old Silk Route that comes through there, if linked together in modern road and rail network and a ring road that would go around these mountains, that would be good economically, and it would create international commerce both north and south, east and west. So that's happening as well. With regard to the border protection, you hear Americans all, how come they can't get control of that Pakistan border? I don't understand that. Well, I mean, obviously they should talk to us because we do so well with our border. We should give them plenty of tips. And we can't just oversimplify these issues. But what I will tell you is this, that in terms of leadership, Hamid Karzai has maintained power. One, because he's an incredibly intelligent human being. Two, he's a Pashtun. These were supposed to be the guys supporting the Taliban. He was found leading 3,000 loyal Pashtuns at he was head of a small clan, and he was leading them in the field fighting these guys. But he's also very educated, and they had what they called a loya jirga, which is like a big circus tent set up, and all the tribal guys get around and they go, all right, let's have our nomination delegation here. And like in Denver, they're going to sort it out. And Hamid Karzai he survived all of that process. So the Afghan people accept it because it's been their tradition for thousands of years. So you don't have an element there that's trying to overthrow Hamid Karzai. What you do have is Al-Qaeda operatives and Taliban that they don't want anybody in control of them. They're pirates. They're like Barbary pirates. They don't want anybody having any control of them, period. And it's been that way for decades in history. Unlike the Soviet experience in Afghanistan, we're doing many, many things right. We have a coalition of powers from NATO, the Canadians, the French, yes, the French. They've been there from day one with us in Afghanistan and have acquitted themselves fine. We see Great Britain, Australia. There are many countries, and then there are NATO countries. Now, some have done more, some have done less. Okay, fine. But they're helping. I personally believe that Afghanistan is going to make it. Time, commitment, and growth of their army and their government is on our side. But again, we just don't need to abandon them. You say, well, what about, how come they can't get bin Laden? Look, I remember a poll in August of 2003 said that 60% of Americans felt that Saddam would never be caught. 34% said, well, he'll probably be killed or he might be found. Only 6% believed that he would be caught and brought to justice. Wow. I should have just quit. Oh, well, the poll came out. All right, guys, let's give it up. Let's go do something else. Let's hand out supplies to schools or something. Because the polls, you can't argue with 94%. We're not going to be able to catch it. We didn't do that. And within 4 months of that poll, We had the bastard. I mean, we had it. It was that simple. So as far as bin Laden goes, we just don't quit. The more active he is, he leaves a blood trail. The less active he is, who cares? He's irrelevant. I mean, we do care because he's the most wanted criminal in the world, but we have to take the long view and perspective on these things. That's kind of where I see Afghanistan going today, is that all of these pillars are on a very solid foundation, and it just takes time to erect them and build them and get the platform there.